This is the Lean Builders Hoots on the Ground podcast with absolutely, positively no bullshido. Join us as we dig into exactly what lean construction is and how we can use these concepts and strategies in the field. This podcast will be different as we journey to job sites and mine the minds of lean builders, all in effort to pass forward building knowledge from those who have put their time in to learn a better way. Because that's just what lean builders do.
What's up, y'all? Adam Hoots here, the lean builder, Hoots on the ground with no bullshido. And today I got my Mississippi brother, Mr. Boone White, in the house. How are you, Mr. Boone White?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
Man, I'm fantastic. I am super excited to dive in. Don't tell the other old dogs, but you are absolutely one of my favorite old dogs that we got hanging with us. And I'm excited to unleash your knowledge or maybe your aggression for change to the lean builder nation, man. I'm super, super fired up for this conversation today. And I want to start in like we always do and just give the people a little flavor, a little taste for exactly who Boone White is.
First and foremost, I'm a born again follower of Christ. That's part of me. That's my DNA. I was raised in Oxford, Mississippi. I'm a husband to a beautiful wife and have 3 beautiful children, 2 boys and 1 little girl. I was raised on a farm here, so I'm a big outdoor guy. I love to hunt and fish. Recently got into golf. I love what I do, man. I love construction. I came up in the field, always been an assistant super or a superintendent, and I love the challenges and the problem solving that come with that.
Farm boy from Mississippi, builder likes to be outside, dedicated to the Lord, and got a good family. Man, it sounds like a pretty good life you're living there.
I'm loving it. I've got no complaints. Just want to do what I can to pay it forward to the industry.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that farm raised life, right? Like to me, I think there's a lot of work ethic, a lot of like nicking your fingers, keeping going, like this aggression for change, wanting things to be different, right? Where did this aggression for change start with you?
Well, the farm boy life was different than a lot of my friends. Every Saturday we were up and we were either cutting, raking, or baling hay, working on fences. So, it was a lot of hard work and, a lot of work with your hands. So I got used to that life. And then working in construction as a superintendent, the first several years were the old school way. Nothing against any of the guys that I came up under. That's just the way they were taught, But the old school way, what I'm talking about is the weekly deep down session, sub meetings, the yelling, cussing, throwing your hard hat, just the old school superintendent, right? And I got fed up with that. And there was a while there where I was like, is construction really what I want to do? Then I was introduced to lean, and I was introduced to the last planner system and everything that goes along with it. And I was like, oh, okay, you can be a superintendent and you can have good relationships at work. You can improve your relationships at home. You can do this job without having to be an a-hole,
Yeah. Why do we still find so many a-holes doing this job?
That's a good question. I think it's either ignorance, they haven't been taught, or it's the way we've always done it mentality. There's a lot of that out there where guys have been doing this for 15, 20, 30 years, and they're like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So it's hard to approach someone like that who's been successful in their career and who has climbed the ladder, and it's hard to approach those type of guys and be like, hey, there's a better way. And they're like, well, I'm doing fine, right?
You reminded me of my journey a little bit. I did the same thing. I came up yelling, screaming, CPM, get it done, push through, have grit, call it work ethic, but really it's work abuse, right? And then I was introduced to the last planner and I failed a couple of times miserably with it. And then I kind of got the hang of it. Then I get to BMW and I was introduced to Takt training and I was like, oh boy, here we go again. Another job's going to fail. And so guess the relationship thing is where a lot of this, in my opinion, fails. I believe, like, I still have a-hole tendencies on job sites, right? Like, I still get into my way of things that like how things should be done, even with all these lean practices and listening, root cause analysis, my wise. It's like I still get carried away in this way. How do you hit that pause button from work ethic, grit, farm boy mentality to drive, change, preparation, making things ready? Like, does that question make sense? Like,
Yeah. My experience was very similar. It was hard to make that transition up front because the first time, or at least the first time I tried Last Planner, I failed miserably because I still had a lot of that old school superintendent mindset. I used it more as a stick and a hold you accountable tool than a communication and collaboration tool. In other words, it was a way to keep those guys in line. It's just another way to, force people to do stuff, right? I mean, you can't force people to do anything. But then once I went through that iteration of trial and failure and then went to the next job, I approached it more of a, hey, this is going to make your life better. And here's why, and here's how it works. And then if you'll just try it. So going into the next job after that first failure, we kept asking the question, hey, is this adding value? Do you see the value in this? Is there something we can do better? Is this just crap and we need to scrap it and not do it? But then we never got that answer. So we're trying to make it fit the guys that we were working with, I guess is the way to put it.
yeah, in lieu of trying to introduce it and let the guys or the people work with it, right? Like, let it be a tool to fix what's broken on a project.
Yeah, and that second time around, we had a boot camp. Was once we implemented on that job, but we had a boot camp, and some of the questions that we asked all the foremen were, "What is wrong with the industry, or what is wrong with the way jobs are currently ran here in Houston, Texas?" Well, I was in Houston at the time, and we got a lot of answers, like miscommunication and pushing people into to do work before that area is ready for them, and all those things that cause delays or cause roadblocks, right? And then so we were able to demonstrate that by using that system, you can reduce all that dramatically, and they can have a better quality of life. They can also work together more as a team. Their companies make more money. They have less downtime. They have just less crap to deal with overall.
And that makes somebody feel good, right? When you don't have all the BS to wade through and you get there and you're just like ready to go, ready to be productive, ready to contribute value, like true value added. I think that's huge. I still can't get past this farm boy grit mentality. Like, I don't know what it is about me that's holding on to that, but I'm struggling with this because I know, like, firsthand witnessed your impact within ICM and the things you're doing in the lean community in Mississippi. And there's still this part of me that's like, okay, because I didn't grow up on a farm, but I grew up around a lot of farms, right? We were picking corn in the summers as middle school teenagers. And it's hard work, it's work ethic. And my dad did it to me intentionally to kind of drive me to go put up with a bunch of crap so that I would become a better person and I would work hard and live this great life, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I'm struggling and I'm wondering, you even have my brain turning. Maybe this is part of our reason why we have such a tough time converting or challenging people to utilize lean or flow techniques. It's this grit, this work ethic that we've been taught in the industry or in the farm life of, kind of that Jocko mentality. Good. Like,
Yeah.
trades get treated like crap and you got to pee in a porta john and you got to eat lunch outside. Good. Like,
Yeah.
at what point do we turn that off and say, no, that's not good, right? Like, if you can get through it and survive it, sure, maybe that's good. But the actual, like the physical act of doing this thing isn't good. And so where do we draw the line from a farm boy grit, get it done mentality to actually having this like care or concern that we are affecting people from a longer term perspective?
So what you're saying is kind of that tough guy mentality is, yeah, this is just the way it is, right? We're going to get out there and you got to work in the hot sun and you got to get dirty and all that kind of stuff, which is the truth. But at some point, especially when what you're doing is affecting others' lives, you got to approach it with humility and curiosity for how to make it better, right? Yeah, I mean, you have to have that grit to get the job done sometimes. But if that grit or that tough guy mentality is holding you back from changing the way you do things for the positives, then is it a good thing?
Yeah. Well, how do you know when to draw that line? Like, how do you approach humility and curiosity?
It's probably more intuitive. I guess if you have a job that's got to get done and it's an immediate urgent job, then that's where the grit kicks in. You got to get it done. But if you have a longer runway to get the job done and you can think through better ways to get the job done, or if you know of a better system of getting the job done or a better, I guess, method of getting the job done, then why not go with what's better, right? So I guess the way you turn off or the trigger that turns on or off the grit mentality is how urgent something is. But once you start getting good at seeing problems several weeks out, then you can change from having that hair on fire grit mentality of just having to get out there and get it done and work 80 hours a week to planning the workout to where it flows and it has the handoffs are clean and you're not having to run around with your hair on fire.
Yeah. I like what you're saying. You're kind of bringing in some of this Eisenhower urgency, importance matrix. Yeah, I love where your mind is, and you're about to turn on like this whole production science light for me because I know how you and I can geek out on that quite a bit. And yeah, the thing that draws me to it is the lack of ability for the people who are suffering to impact the change that is needed. And so when you think about how does that statement make you feel?
So the lack of the ability for people who are suffering to change the state of while they're suffering.
Yeah, well, I feel like it's the people who are suffering the most have the least bit of control over the buttons to push to make the suffering go away.
So in other words, the trades on site, the guys that are installing the pipe or the conduit or pouring concrete, either through ignorance or just through lack of influence in their company or in the industry, don't have the influence to make that change. At least not as individuals, right?
Yeah, I mean, and when they try, it sounds like complaining or griping or bitching.
That's right. And then those guys get ostracized. And that sends a signal to everybody else. Hey, keep your head down and keep working. This is the way we do it.
It's hard to trust the process in the industry, at least from the perspectives that I've had in the past. Some of these lean tools, I think, really help us to trust the process a bit more. It's not the documentation, it's not the post-its, it's not that. It's the telling everybody the plan such that we all move in the same direction.
One of our friends, John, talks a lot about is how could you empower the workers to have that influence on the industry? I think that's some of the stuff he's working on.
Yeah, it is. I almost called him yesterday. I should have. And it could be as easy as just like a pencil and a post-it note, right? That would empower a worker and just ask them to write something on it. I think we overthink this whole respect. And it could literally be a smile on the job site as you ask somebody.
Yeah, I've had an example that came from one of our projects this week, actually. So we always talk about trying to incentivize positive safety on the job site, get out a little gift card or something at the safety meetings. But they actually implemented a system to where if any worker on the job site brings forth a hazard, and lets us know about it, or fixes a hazard and lets us know about it, there's an incentivized prize system that they're going to give out to those people. So now we're saying, hey guys, if you will help us make this job safer, we'll enter you for a drawing, or you get a gift card or something cool like that. So I do have a team that is, trying to think forward like that.
Dang. Man, I got one of the best innovations on my job site ever doing an innovation board. I put a whiteboard and I wrote, "This is the innovation board. Best innovation wins the job site TV." Because, those job site TVs always go missing, right?
Oh yeah.
Anyway, one of our trade workers came up with this brilliant idea. We were building a fence around a power plant at the time, and it was an impenetrable fence. So it was pretty solid, stout fence, cameras on it. One of the guys came up with an idea to go buy one of those tents you'd put out at a ball game. And so that when it rained, that they could prefabricate all of the cameras and lights on the top of the fence posts and the caps, such that we eliminated work at heights and put that on the ground. So when we erected the post, everything was already on the post in its entirety. His name was Kokomo Joe. I'll never forget Kokomo Joe and his smile, the way when he won that TV, he drove home the last day of that job site with that TV. He was so proud, man, big 16-inch television screen that, would have somebody else might have taken something like that for granted.
Yeah.
It was brilliant, and it allowed us to allow the guys to keep working during rain hours as well. Or just, and it's something that I believe as leaders of the job, we were just too many other things to focus on. And when we were able to empower the guys, and we got probably 15, 20 ideas on this $4 million type fence project. It was amazing. And it was literally a whiteboard with a dryer waste innovation on the top. Yeah, I'm telling you, when we expect innovations,
We celebrate innovations.
that's a better word. Absolutely. When we celebrate innovations, they come more plentiful for sure. It's almost like, talking about the good in life, and then you start experiencing more good. Or have you ever seen a red car and then you get 15 red cars raiding down the street? It's the same self-fulfilling prophecy, I think.
Yeah, that's what Paul Anker says in his book. The best way to build a lean culture is to make improvements and then share them, right? Make your before and after videos. And if you get enough of those, and then it starts into a snowball effect where everybody's like, oh, this is cool. And then everybody starts making their little 2-second improvements. And then before you know it, you've got some really good ideas out there that's making your company better or making the industry better.
Yeah. So you talk about this culture of improvement and trying to drive this flow lean culture, and you mentioned you were in Texas and now you're in Mississippi. I'm curious because the lean seeds in Texas are planted deep. You've got a lot of believers down there. We've had some success. The lean builder guys are out of there. So you're doing all this great lean stuff. You're making flow happen and learning the last planner system in the Texas community. And then you get an opportunity to go home and work back in Mississippi. What does that look like, feel like? I mean, yeah. Tell me about that experience.
Yeah. Well, first of all, nothing against Mississippi. I love Mississippi. I grew up here. The people here are, genteel Southern hospitality. But, working in Texas and other places around the country, where, around a big city like Houston or Dallas, you do have bigger influence on change, right? You seem to be a little bit more advanced. Coming back to Mississippi 6 years ago, the first project I was on, I was a superintendent back then. I immediately started trying to implement the last planner system. I was met with the same resistance I was 10 years ago in Houston, or really more resistance, because they're like, what the heck is this? Why are we using sticky notes? We got P6 over here, right? This is some foolproof BS.
I saw somebody post the other day, the only person hated more than the safety person on our job site is the lean person.
I could definitely see that. Trying to make that change in Mississippi, or especially starting off, it was tough. But then once we got most of the way through that project, my team started believing in it. And then a lot of the trade foremen started believing in it. And so that project, it was elementary school. So funny enough, it was the elementary school that my two sons have already gone through and my daughter will go through.
Super awesome.
I got there, they were about halfway through slabs and had started steel on part of it. It's about 107,000 square feet. And it was about a month behind. They didn't have a superintendent because the previous superintendent had been dismissed a couple months prior. They were just waiting on somebody. So I got there and then we immediately started trying to do last planner and reorganize the job and lay down to make everything flow better and everything. So that was late 2019. And then, what happened in the first quarter of 2020, COVID hit. And so, but we didn't run around with a hair on fire. We allowed the system and the process to happen the way it should. And we tried to promote flow. And then we had a not so good electrician, which you probably know this more than anybody. If you have a rough electrician, probably the hardest trade to overcome when they don't want to perform. So anyway, but we got through that job and we actually turned it over on time. And so fall of 2020, they were able to have school. But anyway, through that whole process, it took some grinding, but it also, if you go back to that, what's that mixture of grinding and respect for people? You've got to have both a little bit, especially on a rough job like that. But then going forward from that one, we went and we built the Performing Arts Center at Northwest College here in San Antonio, Mississippi. And we started that one from the get-go with Last Planner. And halfway through that one, I read Jason's Takt book, and then I took his class. And so from the start of interiors, we ran that job. We still had a Last Planner, obviously, but the overall project schedule was Takt. And so we ran through that one, and it was just, it flowed so much nicer.
Yeah. So you still use Last Planner and you integrated Takt and that. And that's a question I get all the time is like, how does that work? And did you have a CPM schedule as well?
So we started with a CPM schedule on that one, and it was a big monster. And I remember, having an update every week, and you make your edits, and then you would, press F9 and pray and hope that nothing got screwed up.
And then you'll work logic and stack trades and all that until I got right, until F9 worked. Yeah.
That's right. But beyond that, I would have to print out a 6-week look ahead, and then I would go through it with a highlighter, and I would highlight things that were behind or things that we need to focus on that I posted up to the wall. But I found that nobody was looking at it. Right. Mm. So then we started to do Takt. And actually, the first meeting I had with the foreman, I actually had them help me slice the building up into zones. So they actually intuitively, which with their builder mindset, helps me with some work density studies, even though I didn't know what I was doing, right? So we got the zones to the right size that they wanted. And then we did a pull plan for one zone while keeping in mind what all differences we had in the other zones. And then we did our Takt phase based on that. So once I got that initial Takt macro printed out and I handed it out to the foreman, I was like, guys, does this make sense? Do y'all want to keep doing this? You want to go back to the P6 schedule? And my electrician, I remember this, he was actually a good electrician. But I remember he was kind of resistant to Last Planner and to all of the lean stuff early on. But after I handed him that and he could see his color on that Takt plan and how his crews flowed, he was like, well, it's a hell of a lot better than that DS on the wall over there, and pointing to the CPM schedule. So that told me that, okay, I'm on the right track. So we kept going with it on that job. And again, that job finished very well, a very pleased owner. We had a lot of respect on that job. I had 11 porta cans on that job for 17 months and one little bit of graffiti in the whole thing. Mm. It was kind of magical how all the trades worked together. They would lend tools to each other and, had lunch together, and it was a team. It was fun.
So you've got these 3 tools in your schedule planning belt, right? You've got CPM, Takt, and Last Planner. how do you know when to use what, or like what does the integration of those look like? Help me answer the question that everybody else always asks me, please.
Yeah, that's been a tough one that we've been wrestling with for, a year or two now. Is how do you do tact, but then how do you stay contractual? Because a lot of AI contracts call out CPM, right?
Yeah.
There for a while, we were just kind of, damn the torpedoes. We were just using tact, and nobody really complained about it and really worried about it. But then we had one client who wanted to see the CPM schedule. So then we were like, okay, well, like, contractually, we have to do that, right? So we were running that job off CPM. And then I was challenged by our company is like, hey, how do we stay contractual while doing all this tact? And I was like, well, I mean, I can logically demonstrate where the critical path is on a tact macro plan. But yeah, if we were to go to a court of law and they, some lawyer says, well, you don't have a CPM schedule, then it'd be a hard fight. So yeah, right. So we were going down the road of using both. And so it was going to be like tact on the job site, and then we're going to have a high level CPM schedule that kept us contractual. But then here recently, we found a software that allows us to do last planner system within the software and is a CPM based software. But I think they're working on having a tax phase view. But that is forcing me to teach my people, hey, tax is not just color squares on an Excel spreadsheet. Tax is rhythm and flow to the work, and it's trying to level the work to where it all goes the same speed, the same distance apart, just like traffic on the highway. So we're going to this software
Can
to,
you shout it out? What software is it?
yeah, it's Outbuild. Those guys are super helpful. You have your overall project schedule, and the software actually runs you through that, and then the look ahead, and then the weekly work plan. It's a committed weekly work plan, and it does all the metrics for you with PPC and BRC.
Colin Creech and Taylor over there. Definitely. I love Colin actually reached out to me and came over to introduce me to the product at Clemson. And I was like, nah, man, I don't want to do this. Let's just go for a walk around Clemson and get to know each other. He was like, all right, let's do it. And that was one of the best business development calls that I've ever been associated with. And I've just recently started playing with the product, and the way it imports exports from P6 is really, really nice to bring your trade partner. Anyway, I'm by no means do I support or am affiliated or anything like that, but I do appreciate what they're bringing. If you're using something that's working and it's really driving, what I hear you saying is driving the structure of the different stages or zoom lenses that we need to hit our schedule at.
It makes the last planner system very standardized the way we do it. And also it really helps with make ready look ahead planning because it ties back to Procore. We use Procore in every job. So if you have an RFI pop up in Procore, then it automatically pops up as a roadblock in your schedule system. When you're looking at your look ahead schedule, you'll see a little road cone pop up that tells you there's a roadblock tied to that task. It also ties to the submittals in the same way. It gives you your submittal due dates in Procore based on what your schedule is telling you. So that's one of the things that really sold me on it is how well it ties back to your submittals and ties back to your roadblocks. You can also create manual roadblocks in there. So like if you're sitting down looking at your 6-week book ahead, you're saying, hey, in 4 weeks, we've got to have a crane here. So what's the plan there? Do we have a crane pad? Do we have that guy lined up? And if you don't, you can create a roadblock immediately in the software and tie it back to that activity with a buffer. And then if you get past the point of no return, it shows up red. And then you got a problem, right? So it kind of puts training wheels a little bit on the make ready look ahead process, which is what we've been focused on this year.
Dalton Hocevar, I'm coming for you. Me and Boone are we're gonna be calling you soon. Dalton's one of my guys working on a job with me out here, and he was flirting with Outbuild, and we're you're anyways. Enough of the software sales pitch, I guess. Which this is not, by the way. I've never officially used it, but I am a fan based on clicks. So what else from integrating CPM, Takt, and Last Planner? How could you wrap that one up with a bow?
I do a lot of our schedules in pre-con, being primarily construction management versus general contracting. We're able to have a longer runway in a lot of our jobs while it's still in design. So if I know a pre-con schedule, and it's the same for me and for our owner, Casey, who's a really schedule-minded individual, we're going to use a Takt macro format so that we can put it all on one sheet and see the entire schedule system as one system. It's hard to do that in any kind of CPM, right? But it's impossible. But so when we have an overall project schedule on a job and it is in CPM in that outbuilt software, that data is coming from a Takt macro that we've already built in pre-con. And we're probably still going to hang that Takt macro on the wall. And then we're going to try to optimize in our C-suite look ahead. We're going to break the zones into smaller zones, and we're going to try to have flow going through those zones at a shorter takt time for the guys who get it, right? It's hard to force that optimization on guys who are really just getting the last planner system. But we have that opportunity to do that. But so long story short, we're always going to start by building the overall project schedule with a Takt macro, and it's going to have all the right buffers in it. And we're going to be able to see the system on one page. That's going to go into an overall project schedule that is super high level, that is a CPM schedule, but it allows our supers to plan within the milestones and the bars through pool planning, and then for the advanced ones through actually using Takt.
Interesting. Okay, so you start with Takt, pre-construction, and then once we have a good flow detail, convert that flow plan into a CPM, check our boxes, and then we get to the job site, and based on the production planning capabilities of the people on the job site, we might use, or will likely transition to Last Planner or some derivative of
Last Planner. For the ones who understand Takt and flow, their pull plans are geared around leveling work and leveling zones or work density in the zones. Their pull plans translate to a CPM or a Gantt chart. When you look at it zoomed out, you can see that trade flow all the way through.
Okay. I like it. That's kind of a different approach than what I've been personally using it as. Here, I'm going to use CPM to kind of guide my start finish key milestones. Then I drive Takt to see, okay, well, how can I play with the flow in between there? And then Last Planner is a way to drive accountability. Which again, there's no right or wrong or way, as long as we're getting shit built. That's the key, right? Flow.
I will say we're always experimenting and we're always trying new things. So I'm not saying this is the way. This is the way we're doing it right now. And it seems to be working so far.
I love it, man. I especially like hey, let's figure out the capability, the production planning capabilities at the boots on the ground level. And then let's adjust the communication to fit what they want, what they need, what they perceive as value. That's a beautiful thing. All right. I want to transition a little bit into, I know you personally, I know you are a reader, a lifelong learner, and I'm curious, what are you reading and or learning?
So I'm currently rereading Radical Candor. I think it's the third time I've read that book. That is, that whole concept is where I am in my career. I've got to be better at communicating directly to my direct reports, and to caring personally and communicating directly, or challenging directly, right? To be on that candor quadrant. I've got a backlog of books, actually, some that you've suggested. Yeah, that's the one I'm currently into. I want to dive into Deming. I have not read enough about Edward Deming, so that's my next goal, is to get a big understanding of his. My favorite thing to study besides lean is the theory of constraints. I'm a big Gold Rat fan. And you and I talked about this, trying to use the thinking processes that he developed. That's an intriguing topic to me.
Yeah. What's so intriguing about it?
A lot of times when you're trying to think through a problem or like what really the problem is, you're just trying to be intuitive about it, you miss a lot of things. The thinking processes allow you to logically and analytically think through, okay, what is the current state? What's the current reality? And then what is the future reality that we want? And how do you get there? It has a lot of if then logic thinking that you make a map of that thinking using if then logic. And then you're able to see what that current reality tree or what that future reality tree is. And also by doing that, it allows you to communicate to others your thought process to where now they understand it the same way you understand it. I think there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, I hear you talking about systems thinking, sir. Yeah. Hooties, undesirable effects, current reality tree. It's not luck, right?
Yeah. Right before it started was It's Not Luck, which is the sequel. For anybody who's ever read The Goal, It's Not Luck is the sequel to The Goal. And it takes the theory of constraints, or really the five focusing steps. It takes it from the factory floor or the job site to your mind in how you solve an industry-wide problem or a system-wide problem.
Yeah, it's like I feel like the goal is driven, or in Eliuhan Goldratt certainly is who you referenced earlier. The goal is like really focused on, hey, when we're in the job site, we're in the field, we're trying to get flow happening on our job. When you get into a position where you're no longer running the work, but maybe leading people who are running the work, now you start to talk about it's not luck, and removing constraints and taking all of those lessons, the 5S, the 8 race, everything we learned on the job site. How do you apply it to knowledge?
Yeah.
And a lot like the undesirable effects and the systems thinking side of things, it is something we're not quite into in construction yet. I think we're getting there.
Some are getting in there, but by and large, systems thinking is kind of like what the last planner system was 20 years ago.
So, what is the system that we're living in? What are we missing right now?
The system that we're living in as far as the industry,
Yes.
I guess all systems have stops and flows, right? And every system has at least one constraint. So what is the constraint? That's your first goal, right? Is identify the constraint. So how do you identify the constraint when you don't have something physical to look at? Like when there's not physical inventory stacking up behind a bottleneck. So I think one of the constraints, or it could just still be an undesirable effect, but one of the constraints is the lack of leadership coming into the industry, or the leadership that's leaving the industry, right? They say that for every one coming in, there's 7 leaving the industry. And a lot of those are the leaders. So I recognized that, I guess about a year ago, is like, hey, our biggest constraint is the superintendents that we're going to have. And I say our, I mean, ICM's biggest constraint right now is the superintendents that we're going to have in the next 5 to 10 years. We have some awesome superintendents, but some of those guys are going to retire in 10, 15 years. And then we have some awesome assistant supers and PEs. And this year, I've dedicated some of my time into just those younger guys, trying to bring them up as quickly as I can so that they are not just leaders, they're leaders that have an understanding and a heart for people. And they have that lean mindset, and they know how to make look ahead planning so that they're protecting the people from stupid, unnecessary overtime. And they know how to take care of the workers, because at the end of the day, the workers are the only ones that are adding value, right? I can't stand some of the old superintendents who are, when I suggest, let's have a break tent, let's get 3 more water zones, let's get them cleaned 3 times a week, or whatever it is. And they're like, I ain't got time for that crap. I'm building a job. I've got to get this crap done. And I'm like, well, who are the actual guys that are building your job? Let's take care of them. If you want to get the job done, if you want to value add to the job, you need the workers to do it for you. So instead of cracking the whip, let's elevate them. Let's make life better for them. And I have several jobs that have embraced that, and it's fun to watch. There's a lot more smiles on those job sites.
They enjoyment, right? They want to come to work. Absolutely. I guess I hear you kind of saying the constraint from your perspective is the lack of kind of human centric construction leadership skills.
That's my perception at the moment. Now, as you start to attack constraints, you know what happens, right? The bottleneck moves. But
Yeah.
as of right now, my understanding and my perception is that is where I should probably spend most of my time.
Yeah. And I need like, so now that we've identified what we think might be the constraint, right now, what do we do?
So you're going to have me try to recite the 5 focusing steps. So we've identified the constraint. Now we need to elevate the constraint. We need to try to make the constraint have more capacity, right?
Yeah. Optimize it. Yeah.
Optimize the constraint. So that's what I've been doing. But so that's one reason that we've put a big focus in the last couple of years on training at our company. And that's actually what we're speaking on at LCI this year is our training program, Align Academy, which we've kind of stumbled through some trial and error in training our people over the last couple of years. And that's one thing we're going to share at LCI is like what worked, what didn't, lessons learned, all that kind of stuff. But we feel like we have a good thing going. You've been a part of it, coming and teaching our people. That is one of the biggest things that we're working on here at ICM is training our people, not just the young guys that I mentioned earlier, but all of our people on how to better understand scheduling. I believe that if you have a good schedule or tax plan that flows, then that is one of the biggest ways you can influence respect for people on the job site. Putting people in dangerous situations or putting people in situations where they can't do their work or they can only do half their work. So a lot of our training goes toward scheduling, but then a lot of it goes toward, hey, what does QC look like? How do you influence people? We've got some training about that. So attacking that constraint or optimizing that constraint right now looks like training for us.
I like it. Those leadership skills are ones that are very, very tough to teach, right? We're talking about different leadership styles. We're talking about emotional intelligence. We're talking about building trust. We're talking about listening, right? Like the vulnerability, the transparency, the self-awareness to understand your blind spots or biases in such a way that they disintegrate. And you're right, we are too busy building projects to focus on the stuff that's going to help us build projects better. Or maybe I should say that's going to help us connect our workers to the projects that they are building better. And I do think training is some of it. I think one, I'm grateful for you and your participation in the old dog group because that is one of the visions behind it, right? With the 7 people dying or retiring to 1 coming into our industry, there's a significant knowledge gap that's worsening. And like the construction companies that exist in the United States, I feel like we all got our kind of production system and nobody wants to tell anybody else what they're doing. And like that's one of the beauties of the old dog group is that, hey, we go beyond company lines and we try and like discover the best way for things to happen in construction. And what do you think is driving because we all have our production system and guess what? None of them work perfect.
Right.
Some are better than others, right? And I believe that perfect production system looks like 2 things. 1, establish flow, plan for flow. 2, go out into the job site. And when your plan for flow fails, fix it through Kaizen and drive flow again. Like that, like to me, it's flow where you can, pull where you can. And that's it. And so Man, from your perspective, like what is stopping the construction industry from taking a Toyota model of sharing innovations and lessons learned and these human centric tricks? Like, what's stopping us from all being one?
That's a good question. I mean, the first thing you want to say is the competition. We're all competitors in some form or fashion, and so there's a lot of corporate mindset, a lot of companies, and they're not all like that. You got people like O'Shea and Jason Schroeder, and people like you that are like, "Hey, here it is, share it. Let's make the industry better." But you have a lot of companies out there that spend a lot of time and money developing their system, and so their corporate people are like, nope, that's proprietary. Can't share that. So I think that may be part of it. And I think also part of it is just a lack of motivation to share it.
Hmm. I mean, I've literally been in companies, organizations that say if you post anything on social media, you're fired. It's
Yeah.
like, why? I want to get off that soapbox because it's one of the reasons I left my first company is because I thought that company didn't really have things going on. I was there for 15 years. I had the golden handcuffs, blah, 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 but I didn't like it. I didn't like the way workers were being treated. So I left. And then I got to a new company. It was lean and everything's supposed to be great. It was the same thing. And I was like, oh, it's the whole industry. And so, yes, which kind of set me and led me on to this podcast and this lean thing and this like, how do I do something different to make things better? And that's what sparked me on my mission. I want to know what sparked your, well, one, what is your mission, Boone White, in this industry, and what sparked that mission?
Well, my mission, like yours and many others, is to change the industry for the better. But my focus is Mississippi. And because I grew up here, I love the people here. I love people everywhere, but Mississippi has a bigger gap in the knowledge and in the execution of building with respect for people and respect for the workers. So yeah, so and also I would say this: a lot of the bid laws in Mississippi incentivize low bid, change order given GCs, just the old school mentality of it's us versus you, it's GC versus owner, it's GC versus the subs. So my goal is to change the industry in Mississippi for the better for the people that are doing the work.
I love how you said change for the better. Right? That's such an important concept that I've only learned in the last couple months because change isn't always for the better. So what sparked that? Like what's driving that?
Well, what sparks lean for me is, like I said earlier, I lived the first 2 years of my career in that old school mindset and just getting more and more frustrated with life. I'm like, why is it going to be this way? Like, why is every day a fight? And then, so I had heard the word lean before while I was in that whole mindset, but it wasn't until I had gotten just about fed up with that old school way of doing things that, like, until then my heart wasn't prepared to receive the message of lean. And so, like, once I got to the point where I was just fed up with the industry and just had that thought of, man, there's got to be a better way, then all of a sudden I was hit with this lean mindset, this lean learning, and I was like, oh, okay, you can do things better. And then after learning it, I was like, why isn't everybody doing this? Like, this is night and day different. My work life's better, my home life's better. The people on my job site are having a better life. And so what sparked that for me, well, in Mississippi, was moving back to Mississippi 6 years ago and coming off those 3 or 4 jobs where I did last planner system and had a lot of success in big jobs, and then coming back here to Mississippi and working on a semi-large job and just seeing, man, it's back to where I was 12 years ago, 10 years ago. So there is a large opportunity here to make a big difference in the industry and in people's lives. So that's what sparked it for me.
Yeah, I love that. And feel like there's a lot of similarities. Like I've heard Joe and Keon stories, and they often say the same thing. Like, hey, I was pushed to the brink. Like I was ready to be done with construction until I found this better way. But for some reason, this word lean has this negative connotation. And, I've made it a point this year to really get people on the show who I value, who I look at as idols. And this is a compliment to you as well, by the way. A couple months ago, it was Nicholas Modig, and he wrote the book, This Is Me. And he said that he would change that word lean. Like that's the word that bothers him the most. The man who wrote the book about what it is.
Yeah.
What would you change that word to, or is it fine?
Well, first of all, I agree with you. There's a lot of negative connotation to that word in the industry. And because a lot of folks think that lean stands for less employees are needed.
It does, by the way. I just found this out. It really does stand for that.
Where it came from?
Huh?
That's where the Americanized version of what Japan was doing, that's where it came from?
Well, because you're eventually going to need less employees because you're doing the work so much better, more efficient, clean. He just posted something on this not long ago. I'm going to go find it. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so I guess from the outset, that word was destined to make people you'd be turned off to it. But a lot of folks have seen fake lean and have seen contractors either try to do it or contractors use it the way I used it when I first used it, which is used as an accountability only tool. So like I had an intern who works for me when I first started learning Takt, and he fell in love with it. And then he went to intern with someone else just to get some, broaden his experience. And he started talking that language with those guys. They're like, whoa, you don't do that here. But no, we will do that lean stuff here. Apparently those guys were jaded from having a bad experience with it because they thought it was going to be the best thing since sliced bread. And it actually turned out that you got to do some work, right? So what would I change the word to? I think the word flow makes a lot of sense. I think the word smart makes a lot of sense. And actually, my previous employer, they actually rebranded it to a smart mode, which I thought was clever. So, I mean, yeah, it's common sense, right? You could even call it common sense because it's just a better way. But I think flow would be a great term. But then you know how terms wear out over time. I really don't want that term to wear out, right? I have to think about what I would want to rename it.
Flow feels right. I like smart. Grow. That was the other thing Nicholas planted in my head. Grow. Because eventually that's what we're doing. We're growing buildings.
I remember y'all instead of talking about the flow unit in construction, you talked about the grow unit, which makes a lot of sense.
Especially with as much fertilizer as we use on job sites. You know what I'm saying, farm boy? I love it. Well, so what else, man? Like, where else should we take this? I want to make sure that we get your knowledge to the world. I know it's like the depth is real.
I guess something to leave everybody with. What is the constraints within your organization? Or what is the constraint in the industry? Like I kind of shared what I think ours is here, but where do we need to focus most of our time? That's what the theory of constraints is always about. It is a year where Dr. Goldrat was talking about it one time, and he said if he could boil the theory of constraints knowledge all down to one word, it would be the word focus. So where do we need to focus as an industry to make the largest change for the good? And I don't have the answer to that.
There's a book called Bottleneck Rules by Clark Ching. Have you read that?
I have.
He's got a formula for his theory of constraints, and it's called focus. You find the constraint, you optimize the constraint, you coordinate, collaborate, curate, upgrade, and start again. Literally, the word is focus with 3 C's. I love what you're saying, where you're going with it.
Another way to say it, if the construction industry is a system, because everything's a system, right? Or everything is a part of a system. If the industry, I guess nationwide or worldwide, is a system, what is the constraint of the system?
Yeah. If the industry is a system and there's a constraint in every system and you can find it and optimize it, that's great. The other thing that I think is really, really hard to recognize, and you kind of briefly painted on this earlier, is like, how do you know when you are constraining the system? Right? How do you know when you are the constraint? And maybe you're constraining it via the relationships you have or have earned or thrown away. Maybe you're constraining it by simply the words that you're choosing to use, right? The language action that the action you're driving with the language that you're using in the tone and context in which you're using it. Like all of these things, and you're right, like systems include everything. Everything is a system, everything is a part of a system. So whatever is constraining construction is also affecting you in your personal system with any relationships you have outside of the industry. Like so this system thinking perspective is yeah, construction as a system. But you are also a system. You're a system, you're a network of relationships, of information, of knowledge. And so when you have two systems merge and combine, right? So I'm a system, construction's a system, there's constraints in each one. And when we merge those two, it becomes very complex. It becomes hard to find what the driving constraint, the critical path constraint is between both systems. And then the painful thing is like, hey, I make a change in my system and then likely I have to wait to see those effects. And
Right.
hopefully I don't give up before I see those effects. And so like you just kind of, I'm talking this thing out right now, but
A
when
lot
you
of times
merge,
it's a long feedback loop.
where are our indicators of feed forward loops and concurrent control loops such that when I hit the light switch, the light turns on versus in our industry, there are 1,000 light switches around the walls, and there's about 4 ways to get all those switches up and down to make things move in the field. And I'm out here flipping switches left and right all day long. And oh, that one worked today, didn't work
Yeah.
tomorrow. And so if like unwiring these systems and just thinking about it as like an electrical system diagram where, hey, if we want this job site to run smooth, to flow continuously, we have to understand the system diagram, the circuitry diagram, such that we can run around a room with 1,000 light switches and make sure 996 of the right ones are off and 4 of the right ones are on in order for the system to work. How do we find those switches? Like more importantly, how do we find the switches that affect our internal personal system such that we can then allow ourselves to find the switches for the construction system?
That's an interesting thought. I think building on your analogy, I think it's an electrical system. It may be more akin to a plumbing system with valves because just like when you
Yes.
turn on your shower and you change it to hotter or colder, it takes in some houses several seconds or some houses a couple of minutes to get that feedback. So now you have more complexity to the system because instead of going and flipping these thousands of valves and getting that instant feedback like you would in electrical, you're having to flip one or two and get that feedback after minutes or weeks or months, right? So that makes it even harder is with that many points of input and then having that long of a feedback loop, how would you ever figure out that system? Patience and time. So a system like the construction industry probably has thousands or millions of points of input or influence. So which one of those points of influence is the constraint?
Yeah.
Or maybe you
In
could
fact, yeah, Cole and Milberg and myself wrote a paper on this actually for IGLC this year. And we talked about from the value generator, like the person who's got the value idea generator, all the way down to the last controller of value quality install. There are stages like at every one of those, and each one of those has the opportunity to influence for the better or the worse. And each person has 4 opportunities to mess it up before they mobilize, as they mobilize, when they're doing the work, and when they demobilize. And that could be knowledge work with designers, it could be install work with boots on the ground. And when you multiply those 4 disturbance opportunities by the number of stakeholders that touch a project, it's no wonder how complex our systems are in the industry.
Well, one where we have over 50% waste in our industry.
And people leaving at a rate of 5 to 7 to 1 coming in.
We'll say this to finish on a strong note. I am excited and greatly encouraged by at least the young people in the industry that I know and I'm here with. I'm excited by that whole millennial, that new generation, because that new generation, and you could look at it negatively and say, oh, those guys don't have grit. No, those guys work. A lot of those guys work hard, but they have the mentality of they're not going to put up with the crap that we've put up with for the last 30 years.
No more bullshido, baby.
That's right. On a positive note, those guys and young ladies are very receptive to hearing about what lean is and learning about what lean is, or whatever the word we're going to call it. They are hungry to understand how to do their jobs better and how to treat people better. And that is very encouraging to me for the future. And it sucks that we still have so many people leaving for everyone coming in, but I think that's one thing we're going to have to deal with. I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunities with all the new technology coming out that's going to help us with that. But at the end of the day, AI is not going to replace a job site leader. AI is not going to be leadership. We've got to be developing these young leaders to move forward and change the industry for the better.
Amen. You do know there's a master plan to develop Chat SPT, right?
Yes, I'm aware of it. I want to be a part of it.
AI can't do it yet, baby, but we're coming. I am excited for our future. And I love how you kind of brought that back where most people complain about, oh, lazy new generation. No, that's not true. They're just not taking the bullshido that we dealt with growing up because we didn't realize, oh, we don't have an option not to take this. Like, maybe that's just short-sightedness on some of our part. And yeah, I'm excited to get to touch the future of construction in the classroom and on the job site. And I see people outworking me on job sites, and man, that gets me excited. Like, I got a kid, Evan Evans, that's working with me right now, and that dude works. He showed up to a couple of old dog calls. That man's been in the field so much over the last couple of weeks, driving work, making things happen, finding bottlenecks. Called me at 7:30 last night talking about, hey, Hoots, man, I was walking the job site and I don't know how we're going to hang these metal panels under the deck or the soffit is because there's no real framing there. The drawings don't show anything. The shop drawings don't show anything. Should I submit an RFI? I'm like, hell yeah, let's go, baby. Like, and that's 7:30 on a Friday. So don't tell me these people don't work. It's, maybe they don't work in the conditions that we're as leaders are asking them to work in. So, getting fired up, having fun, enjoyment is so much an important part of the reason why people are leaving because they are tough conditions. It is not, like,
I mean, yeah, sometimes there are long hours, even on a well-run job, right? But you got to grit through it. But on some of those jobs that aren't ran well, where it's every Saturday and a lot of Sundays, and it's 60, 70, 80 hours a week, like every week, like that's where people are getting burned out.
if you had the magic wand and you changed, like, what does the utopia of construction look like on Boone White's job site?
So the utopia of construction would be workers show up to the job They know where to go. They know where the restrooms are and the restrooms are clean. They know where the lunchroom is. It's clean. They've got an air conditioned place or a heated place to have a break or a lunch. It's very obvious and visual where to go, where materials are, where tools are. There's no tray stacking. People have the right amount of time to do their job in their area ergonomically without killing their body. There's a lot of friendship and respect on the job. There's no trade damage or trade theft or any of that bullshit. We elevate the workers because they're the important ones. They're really the only ones adding value to the job. We have people that want to come to work every day. I think that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
Probably not some detail there, but that's what it should feel like. Is like, hey, I'm having a great time at work. Everybody should have that.
Yeah, I love how worker focused you are in that utopia description. And that's what lean builders do, right? We focus on the worker, we clear the path and make things available to be done in such a way that it's self-organized and self-improving. And that is a virtuous system that will live on forever. Respect the people, not just doing the work, but the people in the lives of the people who are doing the work. That's the level of respect that we need to get to. Thinking not just about the worker in my opinion, like how do we go deeper to the worker's family, to the worker's loved ones, and how do we respect those people such that we provide their worker. Yeah, I mean, every time we talk, I love this the depth of knowledge that we get to. I feel like I want to do another hour with you, man. I don't feel like we got everywhere I wanted to go. Can you give me an example of how this has impacted your family life?
Yes. Before lean, the majority of jobs I did were no less than 60 hours a week on average, and a lot of times more than that. Every project that I did, and through mostly my fault of lack of understanding, and maybe CPM, I'm blaming on that a little bit. The last 6 to 8 weeks of every project that I was on was a fire drill. You know, you're working 7 days a week for that last 6 to 8 weeks, trying to get it done, trying to get that substantial completion. Since then, we've had, I love how I think O'Shea coined this term. Since then, I've had a lot more calm predictability on my job sites. I've been able to get home more and see the wife and kids more, and those relationships have strengthened because of that. I've been able to get to church more. I've been able to do more of hobbies that I like to do, self-care, right? There was a while there where I didn't do anything but work, like nothing but work, or so it seemed. So yeah, it's definitely improved my life. And so now my goal is to improve the lives of others. And I talk a lot about the workers, right? But it goes the same for PMs and superintendents too. If we can get people to understand and implement these concepts and do it with the right heart, right? You can't approach it as a management tool. You got to do it with the right heart for people and for the customer and everything else. But if we can get folks to do that, then not only are the workers' lives improved, but our team's lives are improved. That's a good way to hold on to people.
That was beautifully said. That's what lean builders do, right? We're helping other people figure out that there is a better way. And we don't really care what you call it or what you wear on your shirt. Or I think that you just nailed that piece of it. I love how you started the podcast with a follower of Christ, believer, and how we're kind of going out on a hey, lean flow smart build allowed me to be in church more, not be emailing nonsense and wordings, but actually be focused on me. And I think that might have been a page out of your playbook that I needed to hear just now. So thank you for that. coming down to the end, and I'm going to go off screen, and I want you to just take it, and I want you to talk to the Lean Builder Nation and finish us out. Like, what is your message to the Lean Builder Nation? Be as real, raw, vulnerable, transparent as you need to be. But what is the message that you want to leave us with?
Speaking more to the guys that are really just trying to get started and learning and implementing this, man, you just got to get started. Going back to that grind mentality, you have to grind through that first project or two where you're going to fail. You're going to misstep. You're going to do it wrong. You're going to have people think that it's stupid. You got to grind through all that, and you've got to learn how to do it from that trial and error. It's good to have coaches. Always reach out to coaches, reach out to anybody, reach out to me if you want. I'm happy to help, but you don't let the apprehension of failing keep you from making people's lives better.
Bucket.